Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. This is episode number 48, and I am here with Larry Broughton, who is a lot of times I'm in these networks, and I call them the "How did you get in here?" networks, and the conversations that I get to have, because at some point I'm waiting for security to come and say, "Hey, I don't know how you got in here, but you may be in the wrong room." So, this will be fun. Let me go through your kind of official. Excuse me, bio, and then I'll let you kind of fill in the gaps for us if you want to.
Right, sure.
Larry's an award-winning hotelier. Is that the right way to say that? An entrepreneur, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and former U.S. Army Green Beret. As the founder, CEO of an Anaheim-based Broughton Hotels, CBS News called Larry the nation's foremost expert on leadership and entrepreneurship. He hosted Hotel Impossible on the Travel Show, which is cool, and has rated among the top hospitality experts in the country. Featured in national newspapers and magazines, and you won Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, National Veteran-Owned Businesses Association's Vetrepreneur of the Year, which I think is a cool word, and Coastline Foundation's Visionary of the Year, and many other accolades and stuff that you do. So like I said, I in some cases I feel a little unqualified to be having conversations with some people, but it's, I'm super blessed to be able to have them and to be able to spend time with people that have, especially men that have done things that I would like to continue to do and have some of the successes that we do. So, hey, so that's like the official bio that we have. But if you want, fill in the gaps for us. This is more of a low key kind of let's get to know the man behind everything kind of thing. So give me your story.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks so much. I've watched a handful of your podcasts, and they're great. I love this informal, long form format. I think most people resonate with it. People can find kind of be a fly in the wall.
Yeah.
Instead of somebody coming in just pushing their pithy quotes, we can go deep. I do have to correct something in that bio. So I was not the host of Hotel Impossible on the Travel Channel. I was one of the guest experts on there.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Pretty regularly.
Apologies for that.
And my buddy, Anthony Milcuri, sorry about that. He was actually the creator and host of that show. So I want to make sure that he gets his due credit.
Sorry about that.
So the gaps, I guess, is like, who's the real person behind the accolades, right? The most important thing is I'm a dad. And it's what I take the most joy and pride in, I guess, in my life. I know that might sound corny to some folks, but if you haven't had a child, you may not understand it. But for most men, when I describe my experience when my daughter was first born, Kevin, this is where my brain was. I used to think that my daughter is 22. I used to think that love was a zero-sum game, right? If I love you, I can't love this other person over here as much. I got to pull from some pot, right? And I remember telling my former spouse, I don't know, it was probably 2 months before my daughter was born. I said, I'm really nervous about Emily being born, because I don't know if I can love her as much as I love Madison, my dog. But when I saw, after she was born, and, I cut the umbilical cord and held her and saw her in the little incubator. I mean, did you ever see the movie or the cartoon, whatever it is, How the Grinch Stole Christmas? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the Grinch's heart grows 2 sizes. That's how I felt that day. That's how my heart is with my children. It just, that's the thing I'm most proud of. But I've realized over the years, I'm just an idiot stumbling through life. I feel like Mr. Magoo sometimes. Remember Mr. Magoo, that cartoon where he'd walk out on the scaffolding, and then it would turn and he'd automatically get up, somehow not kill himself walking up on this high-rise thing, right? That's how I feel like my life has been sometimes. But I just show up and act like it matters, and strive for excellence in a lot of things. But behind all those accolades that you described, there's probably at least 5 significant failures for every one of those high points in my life. And that's kind of why I say I'm kind of this Mr. Magoo wandering through life, and but not giving up.
Yeah.
Just being tenacious about life.
Well, it's funny that you say it's funny the timing on this recording of this podcast, because it's been one of my, and it's kind of hard to describe it. I either think of Goose in Top Gun, where he's like, "Hey, do you still have the number for that truck driving school?" It's either that, or what did I do with that McDonald's application? Because I've been at this 25 plus years, and there are some days and a lot of days where I'm like, man, I should I be farther along and less like insecure about what it is I'm doing. I have 3 LLCs and 9 brands, and so, which is not bragging rights. I don't recommend doing that, but so that it's funny that you say that, because I feel like that all the time, for sure.
Well, then the interesting thing is, what do you do with that? Once you have that realization, what do you do with it? For me, I've recognized I have to surround myself with people who are just bolder and brighter than I am. I've got mentors in my life. I look at almost like the sports analogy, and everyone will get this. Even the top, name your favorite sport, then the favorite player in that sport. They still have coaches and mentors. It's not like they stop working on the basics. It's not like they're not seeking wise counsel, right? It's not like, particularly for men, there's not iron sharpening iron. They're doing all those things.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I do. But I have realized I know it's kind of like Larry's being just self-deprecating. Well, yeah, but I'm also just being realistic, because reality is indeed our friend, right? But I do also know what my strengths are. I know what my giftings are. And I have come to the conclusion over the years that if I recognize what my gifts are, that not that I created, but that I believe that there's divine gifts that are in all of us. And we don't use those gifts, I think it's shameful, sinful, immoral, however you want to describe it. And so I kind of lean into those gifts. And one of my gifts is building teams, building companies, being a strong transformational leader. Because I think there's definitely a leadership gap in this country.
Yeah,
for sure.
Kind of top down today, right? So
yeah. I don't think there's many people who will argue with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what are those, like, if we're talking about like God-given blessings, God-given talents and gifts and those kind of things, what are those gifts that make you good at what you do? I try to recognize in myself my own gifts and like, hey, I'm like, this is what I'm best at. I'm a generalist, so there's a lot of those little things that I can do, but it's like, these are what I'm best at.
Yeah. So I realized this at a pretty young age, actually, which has helped me. I was captain of my wrestling team, and I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout. And I'd realized even back then, I was not, even though I was like co-captain of my wrestling team and captain of the soccer team, I wasn't the best player or the best wrestler, right? I was good at inspiring people, so I've been good at that. I know that I'm gifted in seeing potential in people that they don't even see in themselves. One of my businesses is a coaching and mentoring business, and I'm sometimes hired by other big gurus that you would probably know to come in and coach and mentor some of their clients that they're having challenges with. And I'll go through what I call a hot seat session with them. And without exaggeration, 75% of the time, the people start crying through this process, not because I'm busting their chops, but because I'm speaking hope into their life. I'm identifying what they felt was like there might have been a spark in there one day, and they have these breakthroughs, right? So I think that seeing potential in people is one of those things. Identifying strengths in people is really an important element of leadership, and I think I'm really good at that, because I learned this in my special forces days, is that you've got to make sure that people are working inside their strengths if you want to get them closest to their fullest potential, and for them not to burn out. Think about it. Every day you could go into the office, Kevin, and just do things that you're really good at instead of doing the grind. The Gallup organization did a study. They do a pretty regular study. One of them is the State of the American Workforce Survey. But they found that most people only spend about 6%, 8% of their day working inside their strengths. It's no wonder that people are burned out, and that they don't. That's
probably less time than they spend going to the bathroom in that same day, right?
Yeah. And so people are just doing things that they're not good at, that they don't enjoy. And so I try to encourage leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners to identify what folks' strengths are. And there's plenty of ways to do it. And then get them working the strengths, because productivity then goes up, right? Morale goes up. And guess what? Profitability goes up. And wouldn't that be a great thing? Because most businesses, you've been there probably, have had business failures.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's the most important gift that I've got is the leadership and the ability to see potential in people that they don't oftentimes see for themselves. And then, by the way, knowing how to develop that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is like, what does that process look like? And I'm curious, because there's kind of this entrepreneurial side and entrepreneurial journey. I deal with a lot of small business owners in the automotive space, whether it's like a detail shop or painters, fabricators, but they tend to be, one person, or maybe one person and a team member. And so that's a different thing than like I'm leading a team of 200. Yeah. How do you walk people through that process on like, hey, I've identified this new thing for you that you probably didn't even realize and you're not even using.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. So first of all, there are 2 strengths-based assessments that I tend to use. There are more, but these are the ones that my fallback go to every day of the week. Every mentoring client that I work with uses it. Every supervisor, manager, director, executive in my hotel company goes through it. It's called the Colby A Index.
Okay.
And the Gallup, or it's now called the Clifton Strengths Finder. It used to be called the Gallup Strength Finders Assessment. The interesting thing about the Colby A Index is that it measures, and this might sound wonkish here for a second, but stay with me for a second. There's 3 parts of the brain, right? There's the affective brain, which is the feeling part of the brain. There's the cognitive part of the brain, which is what goes on your resume, the education that you've had, the training that you've had. None of those things are strengths at this point. But then there's the third part of the brain that Aristotle talked about for years, and then we forgot about it for a long time, and only maybe the last 70 years we started talking about it again. It's the cognitive part of the brain. And that's how do we reflexively reply to stimuli, right? What's our natural inherent strengths? Take everything out of it, take our education out of it, whatever. Because the older we get, the more we start just we turn into the get off my lawn kind of guy, right? Because that's who you probably are.
My wife accuses me of that often, for sure.
And so we do those strengths assessments, right? And then we find out what people are really, what do they enjoy doing? For instance, just to hit this home, I still do this myself. I still do a written to-do list for those people who are listening. I'm holding up my to-do list. But at the bottom of it, I have a reminder on here that says, avoid anything I'm not passionate about or does not use my strengths as, and then I list out my 5 strengths from the Clifton Strength Finders and my strengths from the Colby A Index. So why do I do that? Because we get sucked into things sometimes, particularly if we're the technician in our company, which most business owners are. Hey, I'm a good detailer, and so I'm just going to do my detailing things. But you might realize, oh my gosh, it might be cheaper for me to hire someone to do the detailing and let me do the strategic planning for the business, right?
Yeah. That's that E-Myth revisited kind of concept.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Right. So, but I've got in here as well is that maybe there's something I'm not good at, but I'm just passionate about it. Right. Like for years, I was passionate about going on mission trips to Zimbabwe. Right. It's not like I'm a great evangelist. I'm not. It's not like I'm a theologian. I'm not. But it's not like I even enjoy going to a soup kitchen here in the US. I don't. But there was something about Southern Africa. I've been to probably 12 or 15 countries on the continent that just pulls at my heart. And so I was passionate about that for a long time. Was it capitalizing on my strengths? No. But I was passionate about it. I loved doing it. I got my energy, my batteries were filled up doing that, right? So we do those assessments. But the other thing is this. We help people chart out this life plan, like how am I going to get from where I am today to where I want to be? And too often people don't even know how to build a team. I've got one of my coaching clients is a CPA from New York, and he was struggling. He was probably, when we first started working together, we've been working with each other probably 4.5, 5 years. He was probably in his mid 50s and had never done over a couple $100,000 in his business as a CPA. Just always couldn't figure it out, didn't know how to lead people, right? And so one of my businesses is we help people place virtual assistants. You have a virtual assistant? We have a company that does that. right? Helps them identify what they need with a virtual assistant, then onboard them, and then get them to thrive. Because there's a whole process there that once you have a team member, how do you get them to thrive? But now he's got 13 full-time virtual assistants with him. His business has gone off the flipping charts. He's now got like 6 different silos and revenue generating silos in his business. Everything from accounting courses to this crazy stuff. And his mind is blown because now what he realizes, he was acting as the technician before. He was doing the tax returns, he was doing the bookkeeping, but that's not what he was good at.
Yeah.
He was really good at leading, but he didn't even realize it because he never had a team to lead. And so he started bringing people in, and now all of a sudden he's thriving. All his job is to talk to the clients, and then he hands everything off to these VAs, and he's now living between here and the Philippines, going back and forth, and just loving his life. But I guess it depends. That's a long answer, but it depends on, I guess, what gifts we identify in the people and what it is that we do. But that's just a couple of examples on, how to find joy in your life, because most of us don't have joy in our life, or particularly around our professional lives.
Yeah. And, we talk about, one of the things I talk about is with men, oftentimes when you ask them who they are, they do what? They tell you what they do.
That's right.
Right. Like, so that becomes their identity. And I was listening to a podcast or saw a little short that you did where you were talking about kind of this whole health integration, but also, one of the things we talk about is this whole man concept. And some of the content I'm working on now is marriage, meaning, and man, which kind of has, those 3 points of the triangle.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that all of this stuff works together, right? I don't know a lot of successful men or women for that matter, but don't have, some successful relationships, whether it's parenting, like you, in your case, talking about parenting and, health and business and, doing what you're passionate about, and all that. Right. So it's this whole man concept.
Yeah. I like that. And the reason that I started talking about it is when I first started coaching and mentoring a couple of decades ago, or 2.5 decades ago, I was all about the bottom line. And I was, so if we were coaching, I was going to be talking about accountability and inventory turn and how's your EBITDA and debt service coverage ratio and all that kind of stuff. And then, in all honesty, my life crashed. I got a divorce and had realized, gosh, I had some areas of my life where I was really excelling in professional development, building my bank account, those types of things, but I wasn't taking care of my spiritual health or my emotional health or the health with my friends or my family or my spouse or my physical health, right? I was off the charts successful professionally, getting accolades all over the place. But if I had a camera following me around in these other areas of my life, it would have been an embarrassment. And so what I'd realized is I didn't have integrity in my life, right? In these other areas, and so I started actually measuring it. And you've heard the adage, right? That what's measured is improved. So just by measuring things, they get better because there's an awareness. Even if you don't even implement any kind of strategy to improve in them, just having an awareness helps you improve in some of these areas. So I developed this thing called the whole health spider graph, and to do that. So I believe, particularly men, part of it is, I think, anthropology, how do you say it? It's anthropology, DNA kind of thing. That is built in us to be a striver, a doer. I'm the hunter. I pull in pull the wildebeest back to the cave. Okay. We don't really talk about, what's going on inside here? Who are you really? What drives you? What are you passionate about? Because we're the providers. And I think, and this may get you some heat, but I think that men and women are different. I think we're built different.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'll take heat on that all day long.
Doesn't mean that one gender is, superior to the other, but I look at it as a yin and yang kind of thing, both equal, both important, but doing different things. Right. And so I think for men, oftentimes there's a lot of weighty pressure on us that we never really talk about, which is why I think male suicide is so high, right? We don't reach out to each other. I'm not suggesting that we all turn into a bunch of whimpering fools and cry all the time, but I do believe that every man has to have at least one other man in their life that they can go to, you know. Every Wednesday night, for instance, for the past several years, me and three of my best friends, we get together, come rain or shine, no matter what's going on. We meet every single week, and it's just us. There's no one else around, and we have dinner together. But after dinner, we, go to another room, and we basically turns into an accountability session, and we get real, and we have this little mantra about that everything we say will be spoken about. This will be discussed in the strictest of confidence. Nothing is going to leave that room, and all four of us say, like, that's the highlight of our weeks, because as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as husbands, whatever it is, there's not a lot of folks that we can turn to sometimes and say, hey, I'm just not feeling like I can, this pressure is really getting to me, or I'm feeling like I'm being tempted, or I feel like I'm about to really compromise my integrity in this area of my life, and it's not something I want to do, or I did compromise my integrity in this area of my life. Now what do I do? How do I recover from this without destroying the entire empire I'm trying to build, whether it's just my family members or my business, right? And I know a lot of men who have these types of relationships, and I don't know any of them would say that it wasn't vitally important to the success of their life, their family, their marriage, their business. I don't know anyone who said it's a waste of time. Don't know one.
Yeah. I mean, because we put ourselves in these positions, and I always call it the difference between have tos and get tos.
Yeah.
I think as men, we have a lot of those have to things, and some of them are self-imposed, but some of them are just being a family leader and a business leader and a company leader. And but it's interesting because I was able to reach out yesterday. Like I said, I was having one of those low entrepreneurial days, and I reached out to a friend of mine. I'm like, do you ever just feel like this is a complete waste of time? Because he's an entrepreneur as well. We're both kind of in the same spot, and he's like, only about every 2 hours of my day do I feel that way. And so then I can say, hey, this is kind of normal that we're
You're
going
not
through.
in it alone. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And I think that's so vitally important. And maybe it's, one of your listeners or many of your listeners aren't entrepreneurs, but it's just the daily battles that we have to go through. Like, do you ever feel like you're just not appreciated by your spouse? Do you ever feel like just the boss is, grinding me down and taking advantage of me? Do you ever feel like that? And I will tell you this, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I've got to. I used to not admit any of my quote unquote weaknesses or vulnerabilities, because to me that looked like a sign of, weakness, right? And my former spouse was having a really difficult, and this embarrasses me even to say it, but she was having a very difficult time. One time we were living in San Francisco, and she said, did you ever just like have a panic attack and you just freeze up and you can't think and your heart's racing? And I said, I have no idea what you're even talking about on this.
Which in the back of your mind, you're like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, just because that morning I was white knuckle driving, like, oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack right now. And if I'm not very careful, I'm going to like drive off the road here. Right. But this is the woman who I was married to, and I couldn't admit to her that this was going on in my life. And it was an ugly existence. And what I had to do was, through therapy and everything else, and having men speak into my life and grab me by the shoulders and say, no, this appropriate vulnerability takes courage. It takes strength, because, dude, what you're doing now ain't working
right
anymore. Your best efforts got you here, and it's a crap show. All right. And so this is what good men in men's life are supposed to do.
Yeah. And
They're
having
battle
that
buddies, basically.
Yeah. And you talk about the warrior mentality a lot, right? I think that, obviously somebody that comes from the armed forces and special forces and operators and that kind of thing, that's a very upfront kind of a thing. But what does that warrior mentality look like?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with facing your fears. I get nervous, and I used to be very nervous with guys in the special operations community who used to say, I'm fearless, or they would pretend that they were fearless. Like, there's something wrong inside your brain if you are fearless.
Yeah.
I would rather have you fearful, but have the courage, the intestinal fortitude to move forward anyway. Right.
I literally am wearing this t-shirt that says failure is always an option. Do it anyway.
There you go. Yes. Yes.
So
Right. Well, that's where we do all of our learning is from failure. Right. And this is part of the problem, I think, in our society is that with the few exceptions of John Maxwell and some of these folks who actually talk regularly about failure, is that we don't allow people to fail. Failure is just that necessary struggle that we ought to be calling learning. Right. Because think about any time you do something new, you're going to fail at it. You're not going to be a rock star at it. But the warrior mentality, for me, is being selfless, right? Striving for an agenda that serves the community over my own agenda. And sometimes that even your community might be your family.
Right.
Right. It might be your neighborhood. It might be your city. It might whatever it is. But I'm subordinating your own agenda when the community can be better served. Right. I think that's why Special Forces A teams, there's 12 guys on a Special Forces A team. These are all type A, IQs probably above 120 on everyone. So these are smart guys, hard chargers, alpha males, right? In any other environment, you put 12 guys like that in a boardroom, what's going to happen? Fisticuffs, right? Argument. Right? But for some reason on a Special Forces A team, it's like watching, I don't know, a play, an orchestra, ballet, something's going on because everyone knows what the mission is and we're all striving towards that same mission and we're working off of each other's strengths. So the level of selflessness, I think is really important. One of the things my son pointed out to me years ago is it was some kind of fluke crazy thing. In a matter of like 3 months, we saw 3 accidents happen on the Southern California freeways down here. And I pulled over and ran towards the accident to help. And he made a comment after the third time. He's like, Dad, did you notice like no one else is pulling over and you're the one that's running to the accident, right?
Yeah.
I think that takes a bit of a warrior spirit. You run towards the gunfire, you run towards the flames instead of running away from them.
Yeah.
You know? And sadly, my own personal commentary is that I see a lot of people running away from the challenges in life in our country over the last couple of decades anyway, instead of serving our fellow citizens, community members, whatever.
And that's just a self-centeredness, right? I mean,
I think so.
Like, yeah.
I think so. And letting fear get the best of them. Right? I mean, we don't even let kids run on playgrounds anymore. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They take monkey bars off of playgrounds now. You don't have those awesome. When I was a kid, they had those, not the merry-go-rounds, whatever it was. But you remember what I'm talking about?
They're literally it's just a circle and you try to get it spinning as fast as humanly possible. Yeah.
So some people say, oh, Larry, you're such an idiot. But no, I think that those small little bumps and bruises toughen you up along the way. If you haven't had small little bumps and bruises when you're a child, what's going to happen when you first get bumped and bruised the first time somebody tries to pop you in the mouth when you're a 13-year-old boy?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to run the other way. And then what happens if that doesn't happen? And all of a sudden you're a 23-year-old and you got to stand up to your boss.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? It's one of the disagreements I used to have with my former spouse, and she's an amazing woman, by the way. So I am not bagging on her. I promise you. It's just that we realized we were both broken when we got together, and we didn't have the timing didn't work with us. When she wanted to work on it, I didn't. When I wanted to work on it, she didn't. Kind of thing. But we just didn't agree on some of the things. As I was like, my son needs to be in at least 2 fights while he's in school. One where he gets beat up. Right? So he knows what that's like, and one where he actually wins, so that he learns how to win a fight with humility, right? And she was like totally against that. And I know, I'm sorry, you're going to take some heat, Kevin, on this, and I will too. I know I've taken heat on this before, but I think that there are important lessons boys learn from getting on little playground scuffles.
100%. Right? Yeah.
And we've taken all of that away. What happens? People get, what do they call it? Expelled from school when somebody pushes somebody. Now I get that I've seen some of these videos that happen in some of these inner city schools where the students, because there are no repercussions, they beat teachers up and those types of things. That is.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying it and learning a lot. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one coaching. We can talk through a ton of different issues. I can give you guides, guidelines, and logistical help to help you take that next step or go to that next level in some of the things that you're dealing with in your life. We also have some course content, some guides, and a lot of educational materials over at maxedoutman.com. For the coaching, go ahead and go to maxedoutman.com/coaching, and you can learn about that. And then just go to maxedoutman.com for everything else. Thanks for joining us. Now back to the episode.
Those people need to go to jail. But I'm talking about a 9-year-old against a 9-year-old. You know, I'm not talking about a 17-year-old, 200-pound kid who punches an old woman. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff, people. Right. But I just think that, the Stoics talked about this, how struggle is where meaning comes from. Right. This is where we learn. Right. And so I just think that we've kind of bubble wrapped our entire society. And so it's no wonder that we have a lot of confused people out there right now. And we're lacking this warrior mentality. I can tell you, my father was a Marine in World War II. He was on Iwo Jima. I don't think there's anyone who would question that what we call the greatest generation did not have a warrior spirit about them, right? I mean, after World War II, they came back and rebuilt America, right? Yeah. But what we forget oftentimes is that I believe, now this is totally anecdotal based on World War II vets that I've spoken to, they didn't become men by going to war. They were men before they went to war. These are guys and girls, but guys mostly, who served in World War II, who grew up during the Depression. There was struggle every day for most of the country. They had a hard life. They knew how to grind it out, right? And then they went off to war. So the first challenge that they had was not picking up a rifle to go face the enemy. They've been struggling for their entire life. That scares me because we've taken the struggle out of everything. Right now.
Yeah, I mean, they were they're getting their parents to sign off. There's freaking 16-year-old.
Yes.
There was, I cannot remember, Louis. He had a movie made about him, but he was 14 when he enlisted because he lied.
A medic.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look it up and add it to the show notes, but he flew planes and he was very famous for what he did. But, it's 14-year-olds. Like, I can't imagine even an 18-year-old boy today. And they're talking about it right now with the Israel and Palestinian conflict. They're talking about World War III and where they're going to move to and how they would never we have so few of those people now, men and women. And to your point about World War II, the stay-at-home moms that had literally never done any of that, they went to work in the factories willingly to make sure that we had it, right?
That's right. Yeah. I remember now there was a movie back in the 70s or 80s with Ricky Schroeder, who played and this is based on a true story, a kid who went into the Navy, I think it was, at 15 or 16. And served in the Pacific, did some pretty heroic stuff. So yeah, that was pretty common where these young 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds were volunteering, lying about their age to get in. Would that happen today? Sadly, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, somebody posted a meme the other day that they were talking about like what we were supposed to have by now, 2023, and it's like back in the 1950s, we'll have flying cars and we'll have this and we'll have this, and it said actual 2023, and it's got a news. It's literally like a screenshot of the news, and it says PB&J sandwiches, are they racist?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I thought you were going to say it just had a dumpster fire.
I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it depends on what you want to say, but yeah, it's and I mean, you're raising sons. So I've got a 26-year-old and 24-year-old daughter. So I've raised daughters, and I always like to ask men, especially successful men, and you clearly are investing in your kids. How old is your son now?
Well, that's an interesting question. My son would be 19 right now, almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in January. He was killed in a car accident.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Yeah, so he was 17 years old. So it's the last almost 2 years has been pretty rough
Oh,
for my
I'm
family. I mean, you know
yeah.
this as a father, you look at children, particularly sons, as like your legacy.
Hmm.
Right? And once that's gone, it's like, what happens to my life now? You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead with your question. I mean, I father a son. I look at this a lot, but your question was going to be what? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm curious about how you see these boys. How do we help these boys become men? I mean, obviously, if your son was
Right.
17, he was kind of in that time
Oh, I
frame
was
because
focused on that. I was totally focused on that. Let me share this with you. So my son was this amazing young man, turning into a young man. And when he, I say transitioned, when he died, he was um, 6'2". Okay, so he was skinny, but he was tall. He was going to end up being like his dad. Like I'm 6'5", right?
okay.
240 basically. So he was heading in that direction, right? Um, but for years, I'd realized my job was to prepare my son, not necessarily protect him. Obviously, if there was a gang that was going to beat him up, yes, I was going to step in. But my job was to prepare him for life, and so we struggled. I made sure that he had some struggle in his life. I'm going to look on my phone because there's a photo on here of a something that he wrote to me a bunch of years ago that I'm about to post on social media. But what I'd realized I needed to do for him is to prepare him to deal with some of the struggles that you and I are talking about so far. At his celebration of life service, 17, I think it was 17 of his friends, his buddies, who were all 17, got up on stage at this event and shared the lessons that they had learned from my son.
Wow.
And do you ever think as a parent, are the messages I'm trying to send, the lessons I'm trying to teach, are they even sinking in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With your kids? So they all got up there. Every one of them said, and you'll start picking up on this. Ben is the one. His name is Ben. I call him Bullet, and there's a reason I call him Bullet, by the way. And maybe we'll get to that in a second. But Ben is the one who taught me how to shake hands and to look somebody straight in the eye.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
To stand up when I shake hands. Ben is the kid who was the first one to approach me to invite me into their friend group. Right. Ben was the one that I could call when I had no one else to talk to. Ben is the one who told me about being like the rubber duck, or being like the duck, be calm on the surface, but paddle like hell underneath. These are all lessons I was trying to teach my son. And here it is. He's taking what I'm sharing with him that I thought was like going over his head, or he was glassy-eyed, and he's teaching his friends these kinds of lessons. Right. And so we had a whole list of little anecdotes like that, like, never take the stairs into the pool.
I love that.
Men don't take the stairs into the pool.
Right. Yeah.
So there are goofy things like that, but important things like, too, let your word be your bond. And I don't think a lot of men get intentional with teaching their men anymore. I mean, quite not. We see the statistics. Most homes in America now don't even have a father in them. Is there any? Of course, we're going to have problems.
And right? the data is 100% expository about that. Like if you look at when divorce became more popular, when fathers actually started vacating the home, then all of these, everything we see as a societal problem from like a home and community and all that, it's all stems back to this, what is really the loss of the nuclear family. And even if there is a two-parent home, it can be a father that's not fully engaged. That can be a big one.
Hey, I love my father. He passed away a bunch of years ago. But I wouldn't say that he was fully engaged with his kids. He wasn't. He was fully engaged with making sure. I mean, we were in survival mode, right? Because he earned a grub stake living, and he was engaged with making sure that we had a roof over our head, that the bills were paid, that kind of thing. But he was not engaged in like teaching me how to be a man. What I learned though is I learned by watching him, right? And again, I just want to say, hey, my former spouse was a great mom and a great person. And I'm so thankful, and I would encourage anyone who does go through divorce or is going through divorce is to like commit 100% to your former spouse, that the kids have to come first and that you're going to both invest in them. I sacrificed a lot. Not that this is the way everyone should do it, but I promised my kids when we went, let's see here. So I got divorced 12 years ago. So my daughter must have been 10, I guess. So my son must have been 7, rough ages. Maybe he was a little bit younger than that. Oh, actually, it was a year younger. So let's say 9 and 6 or something like that. That was the hardest. And I've done some hard things in my life, but the hardest thing I ever did was to tell my kids that we're getting a divorce. See the alligator tears come out of their eyes about this was a real difficult thing. And so I promised them I'm always going to be within a bike ride of where mom lives, right? Wow. Because I heard so many stories about parents moving out of the county or out of the state or not seeing each other or giving up on it. And they're doing the FU to the parent, but I mean, to their former spouse, but it's damaging the kids, right? And so I'm really grateful that their mom and I both just committed to making sure that they had as much stability as possible. And thank goodness she did remarry, married a great guy. And, you know, he was a great role model as well. So, so I'd mentioned that was the most difficult thing, I should say, with the exception of when my son
losing your son, right? Yeah,
died. That was very difficult because that was in a car accident, and I happened to have been the one who found him.
Oh man, you know, yeah,
which is a story in and of itself. But anyway,
and I mean, it's interesting because, you know, I'm a Christian, and so my view on death and all of that is a little is different because I don't see it as, you know, final. And however, being the one that's left behind when we lose those people is so unbelievably difficult. But I commend you because you mentioned the word legacy, right? Like, you only had him for 17 years.
Yeah.
But if you just take those 17 friends that stood up at his funeral, that's the legacy in and of itself, right? That's like beautiful. I'm trying not to get choked up right now having this conversation because it's like that kind of legacy impacts literally thousands of people and maybe millions, right?
That was not lost on me sitting there that day. You know, I'd done the eulogy and the welcoming of people, and, you know, on behalf of our family, I was talking about the impact that I thought he had. And then to see these young guys get up here in the special forces community, we would have called them force multipliers.
Right.
And so, yes, absolutely. And I've recognized that I know my son better today than I did before because I've heard all these stories. Now, and I've written them down, and so that's been really super powerful. The legacy part of it. And when it comes to the grief and grieving element, I too am a Christian, and this is why I use the word transition. Now, I use languaging that a lot of people don't use. I don't call my former spouse my ex. To me, ex means negative. You know, crossing it out. I just don't want that negative energy in my life. I know that might sound California woo-woo for some people, but also, I didn't lose my son. I know where my son is.
Yeah,
I love that. Around me every day. So I just say he transitioned. You know, there are some Native American tribes who say he's gone on to the next camp. You know, different cultures call it different things, right? Because I think we all understand, even people who are non-believers, something happens with that spirit. You know, there's an energy that we have, and we know that energy isn't, you know, doesn't die.
Right.
You know? It continues on. So there are times when I actually feel, but I will tell you this on the spiritual journey side of it. On the outside, Kevin, I was trying to keep it all together for my family, for my daughter, for my former spouse and her family members, and for my the people that are my team members, employees, folks. But when I came home for those first several months, and and beyond sometimes, I would cry, I would scream, I would curse God, I would swear at God, I would, you know me with all of my effing flaws. Why am I here? And that innocent person who could have, I mean, I was so angry. But thank goodness I had the other side of me said, the God that I love and I know that loves me, his shoulders are big enough. He
can
handle this.
Yeah.
Right. And but I just need to get this out, because even those three guys that I hang out with every Wednesday night, there's only so much that they can take. They've got to live their lives as well, So oddly enough, in some ways, my spiritual life, although it's changing a lot. I'm doing a lot of searching right now.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying it and learning a lot. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one coaching. We can talk through a ton of different issues. I can give you guides, guidelines, and logistical help to help you take that next step or go to that next level in some of the things that you're dealing with in your life. We also have some course content, some guides, and a lot of educational materials over at maxedoutman.com. For the coaching, go ahead and go to maxedoutman.com/coaching, and you can learn about that. And then just go to maxedoutman.com for everything else. Thanks for joining us. Now back to the episode.
But I'll just put it this way. My relationship with God, whether it's religious or whatever, my relationship with God is stronger now than it's ever been, And I think that's a good commentary just on life, isn't it? That the more we communicate with someone, the better the relationship gets. When we stop communicating with people, that's when chaos creeps in.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's in a marriage, whether it's in a business environment, or whatever, you stop communicating, chaos creeps in.
Yeah.
So that's I've learned a lot during this last couple of years. So I didn't mean to take this conversation down that path, unless you want to go down that path.
I love that. I love that path. There's no, I'm very forthcoming on this podcast with my personal beliefs, and like, I don't, I'm not trying to alienate anybody or anything like that. But like, I mean, I would be completely lost without, God in my life and my spouse of 28 years in my life. Like I would just, I wouldn't, there'd be no purpose. And so, and that view of God, to be able to be pissed off at God, like, I think that's fine. Like, I think that's God expects that from us. And one of my wife has this, and I don't know if you've watched The Chosen. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but that view of Jesus, I love, because he's sarcastic. He gets angry, he gets annoyed, which I think is hilarious, of the disciples. And so that, if you've never watched that, and I've said it on this podcast before, go check that out. That's great. But then I have this other vision of God. There's a song called We Danced. And I can't remember it's Hillsong, or I think I can't remember which worship team does it, but it's basically talking about us dancing with Jesus through life. And it's this like very intimate kind of, especially for a guy, it's a little bit weird, because it's like, it's that vision of having that intimate closeness, but that intimate closeness also means he gets to see the worst of you.
Of course. Right? Yes. Well, that song, I can tell you, there was a season about a year and a half ago, as I was going through this, I probably listened to that song over and over and over again, because it got so deep. It touched my heart so much, it forced me to cry.
Yeah. It's by Bethel, by the way. I think it's a Bethel music.
I think you're
song.
right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. But it was so moving. But I too enjoy the portrayal of Jesus in The Chosen, because, it says, he was fully human and fully God, right? Fully man and fully God. Well, if you're fully human, you're going to be angry sometimes. You're going to get frustrated, right? But what do you do with that? That's the other thing. If I get angry and I go beat somebody up, or I, act out in an inappropriate way, that's different. Right. Than getting angry, recognize, okay, this is a natural human response to stimuli. Right. Viktor Frankl talks about this in Man's Search for Meaning. It's that fraction of a second between the stimuli and our reaction that makes the biggest difference. Right. So that I enjoy the Chosen as well. Yeah, it was great. It's great. I would encourage people to go see it, whether you're a believer or not. It's just great.
It's just good TV. I think they're on season 4 or something like that, and you can get it for free via the Chosen app and all that. Like, this isn't a commercial for the Chosen, but it's very cool.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for not knowing that and bringing that up. But I think it's a poignant conversation to have. I have 2 daughters, and I'm curious, like, how you've approached your daughter, your relationship with your daughter, and how you're teaching her. So in my case, I've tried to teach my daughter what it means to be a man, and how I've taught them how men should look in their lives, right? Like, that's been one of my big things. And my daughter, and again, I've told this on the podcast multiple times, but for Father's Day, she said, I know what I need in a man based on the way that you treat mom. Right. Like, that's and she's been through a series of not great relationships. And she's actually just now found a man that treats her the way that, mom went down to visit. He brought flowers to the airport. He calls her Mrs. Davis. He calls me Mr. Davis, and like Southern kid. And, but I'm curious, like, how's that differential? Cause I know men sometimes don't really know how to connect with their daughters as well as they do with their sons.
All right. So, such a great question. As we started earlier, I'd said men and women are different.
Mm-hmm.
So I treat her differently, right? It's not always been sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows in our relationship, because she was 9 or 10 when we got divorced. And so she could see, I'm just going to get transparent if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And again, I'm just sharing stuff that's difficult. And when I say I'm embarrassed about stuff that I've done, I'm not who I used to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank goodness I'm not who I used to be. But I remember, and I say this with some shame, but I also can detach from it. I remember when my daughter was about 6, and I had some anger issues early on, not early on, but through much of my childhood and then into my adult life. They're not there now, thank goodness. But I remember her being about 6, and I don't know what the heck she did. I had a bad day at work or whatever, and something happened. I was standing we had this kind of open floor plan. And so in this living room area, and I was standing over her, yelling at her, like yelling at her. And she looking up at me, and just tears are rolling down her face. And I had this out of body experience where my former spouse, her mom, was standing in the kitchen. I was standing next to her watching this happen, right? Maybe she was 8. And again, I'm a big guy. She was a little blonde girl, blue eyes, looking up at me. And I looked over and I could see this happening. And I said to myself, what have you become?
Mm-hmm.
You are an effing monster right now. And that was the beginning of a change.
Oh, okay.
For me. But 8 years old is old enough to remember. And she still remembers that today. And it breaks my heart when I think about it. And she and I have talked about it. And so when she turned about 13, she didn't want to spend any time with me any longer. We had 50-50 custody. She didn't want to come to my house. She didn't want me calling her. She didn't want me texting her. She didn't want anything to do with me. And I was like, to her mom, we have a marriage separation agreement that says she's with me 50% of the time. And she said, well, if you want to have a relationship with her, you got to give her space. And well, can I have a relationship with her if I'm not spending time with her? And she talked me down, thank goodness. And she said, listen, I did this to my parents. This is what girls do. Just like boys are going to rebel against their mothers, girls are going to push against their fathers sometimes.
13 and 14, my kids, both their heads were spinning around. And
right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like from The Exorcist, kind of, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it went on for a couple of months, but what I decided to do, that I was going to text her every couple of days. I was going to send her a card twice a week. Just say, hey, love you. Hope you're doing great. I believe in you, whatever. Just a fun little inspirational kind of thing. So that went on for a couple of months. And then she said, okay, we can, let's get together for dinner once a week. And so I started basically dating her You know, I would show up dressed up. I would open the car door for her. I would make reservations at a restaurant, showing her how a man is supposed to treat her. Because I couldn't show her through her mom.
Right.
Anymore.
Yeah.
I could show how I treated her.
Yeah.
Right. And so that went on, and then, you know, things got a little bit better. And so finally she called me one day and said, or no, actually her mom called me and said, hey, Emmy wants you to come over to talk to us. And I said, what does she want to talk about? She said, I don't know, but why don't you just come on over? And so then I like start to panic, like,
oh yeah, here it comes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, here it comes. Like, worst case scenario, she's pregnant or something at 13 or 14 years old, right? And I mean, I knew it wasn't that, but it's just, you know, my brain went there. And so we went over and sat on her mom's porch, and she didn't come down for a while. And after a while, she came down and she said, so finally she came down and she just had been, it was clear she'd been crying. And so she gave me a hug, gave her mom a hug. But the bottom line was this: she said to me, listen, I'm really sorry about the last few months. A lot's going on. We've moved. I've started my period. I started a new high school. Mom's getting married, you know, new family. All this stuff is going on. I feel like my life's in chaos. Life is in chaos. And I just needed to control something. And I knew that you would not run away.
Yeah.
I knew you would not run away. That touched my heart like you would not believe, right? And so I ask myself oftentimes, okay, when the going gets tough, am I just going to run away, or am I going to lean in? And thank goodness I didn't just get angry, pissed off, like, oh, she doesn't want to talk to me, well, I'm not going to talk to her. No, I had to be the adult in the room, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so now, all these years later, like we had dinner last night, and she said, I have so much fun with you. We can talk about things I can't talk to mom about. Not that she doesn't have a great relationship with her mom, but she can go places with me that she can't, you know, with her mom. And so we talk about, she's got a young man in her life, and they seem to be quite serious, and he adores her and treats her really well. And so we were talking about, okay, what happens when you guys have arguments or you have misunderstandings or whatever? How do you deal with that? And so we talk through that. Because my role now has changed. You know, I will always be her father, but she's now a young lady. She's a young adult. And she's not a child. And so I can have more deeper, more meaningful conversations than about her favorite toy.
Yeah.
You know? So I share this to say life is a journey. And even in, you know, those moments where I felt like my daughter didn't want anything to do with me, she did. You know, and it got better on the other side. Because I know men who have moved away from their families. They moved to a different state. Like that blows my mind. And so what effect does that have, not just on the family, on the kids, but on their grandkids?
Yeah.
This legacy, like I said,
you literally changed the course of the trajectory of your entire family.
That's absolutely correct. And we forget that sometimes. We think it's about us, and it's not about us. It shouldn't be about us anyway. And so, and this is multi-generational impact that we're talking about here. So that's what my daughter.
What a great foresight on her part to be able to then come back a couple months later and say, hey, here's what's going on, right? Like my daughter has said multiple times that having that security to know that we're, you know, and in this context, she's like, because you and mom had, you know, I know you guys are always going to be there and always going to be together. I mean, we've been together 30 years now, 28 years married. Right. And so, but to know that with me, I mean, we went through a situation with my oldest where she came out, she's actually married to a woman, and which is a, you know, conservative Christian family is something we had to deal with it. Right. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I remember distinctly when this happened, and when she told us she was getting married, she said, I wasn't afraid to tell you this because you're going to love me anyway. Right. Like, I don't like that, having that, like being able to be in your kids' lives to a point where they have no doubt that whatever they tell you, whatever they're going through, will not impact whether or not you stay.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a huge thing.
Of course it is, because now you always got that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What's the alternative? And we know the alternative because we see a lot of people who do it, where you could have disowned
Yeah.
her. And what message is that sending to
Yeah.
you about love and about
Yeah.
grace and about
Yeah.
forgiveness? It's one of the mantras that we started in about 4 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic with my team members is like, listen, we're going to be doing a lot. We're going to be working harder now than we ever have with fewer people.
Yeah.
Right? And so some of us are going to be making mistakes, and we're all on pins and needles right now. And so we need to offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of those words has meaning. I took a long time to put those together: grace, patience, and forgiveness. Because we can offer all those kind of things, but we don't sometimes offer them freely. There are conditions on them, right? And we hold things over people's heads, but freely and often. And I've gotten to the point now, I use that in all areas of my life, with my friends, with my family members as well. It's not my job to be judging, I guess, ultimately judging. Obviously we need to judge people every day. Otherwise bad things will happen, I suppose. But I guess on the grand scheme of things, I would rather your daughter be in a loving relationship, that's committed, than the other ugly options that could be out there.
And we love Lauren, who's her wife. She's actually a drone pilot in the Army, which is pretty cool. Awesome. but we just we love her. And it's interesting because her mother actually passed away about a year before we met her. Yeah. And my wife has now become the mom that she needed. So it's this whole,
awesome is that?
Whether you believe that God ordains certain things in your life or not, I do. And I think it was really poignant in how all that came together. Was it? And, with any kids, no matter what decision that they're making, and obviously we want to guide them towards good decision making, like we're talking about, but that's their decision to make, first of all. And there's always an alternative. And if you're there and supporting them in the best way you can, and I should say, they're never going to take the path that you want them or expected them to take. At the end of the day, they're almost that very rarely happens.
Yeah, but the lessons that we teach, what I don't want to do is let men off the hook to say, well, since they're never going to take that path, why invest the time and energy?
Oh, right. Yeah, 100%.
I question that with my son, right? Like all these little lessons that we've been teaching. We'd sit on the edge of his bed every night and had a picture of a lion in his room that a friend gave me. And we'd talk about, you got to be like the lion. What does that mean? Well, there's times when lions don't hunt alone. They sleep when they need to sleep, right? I mean, we had lots of these little lessons that we were constantly talking about. But he went on and taught them to his friends, and they did actually sink in.
Yeah.
Right. Now, did he want to ultimately choose the career path that I would have wanted, or marry the woman I would have wanted? You're right. Those things we don't have a lot of control over. Right. But I would much rather, again, this is not to sound political, but I would rather the lessons that I'm trying to teach my child sink in than the lessons of the state and government are trying to teach our children.
Or, media or social media or whatever.
Anything other than what my values are.
Yes. Yeah. Because we have a responsibility to teach our children our belief system, and hopefully our belief system is a good one, quote unquote, right? Like that's the ones that serves the community and our family and is one of integrity. And that's really what you're talking about is the integrity piece.
Yeah, because I had children a little bit later in life. Like I've got a twin brother, and his grandkids are older than my kids. Okay,
wow,
that just tells you. He started early, I started late in life, and so I was intentional about teaching my children the lessons that came from both success and from failures. Right, and I've been blessed. I've traveled quite a bit, not as much as many people, of course, but I just visited my 45th country.
Wow.
Right. And I love studying cultures and see how people are raised and how people interact. And with all of our flaws in this country, I still believe that we are the best country in the world. I still believe that we've made the greatest positive impact on the world. And those are the lessons that I want to be teaching. And if I learn things on my travels that I think this would be a good lesson, I've tried to teach that to my children as well. I just try to remain open-minded on some things. There are some things I believe are inherently evil, and I know that's going to drive some people nuts, but I do think that there truly is both good and evil energy and stuff in the world.
Yeah.
And I wanted my kids to be aware of that. I did not want them to go into the world thinking that, like, we live in Orange County, California.
Yeah. Okay? So there's upper middle class white area, right? Like that's.
I did not want them to think that it's all Disneyland, the entire world. It's there's a lot of ugliness.
Yeah.
As well. But also there is amazing beauty in the struggle and the suffering. As I mentioned, I've been to the Middle East and Zimbabwe, which at one point was one of the poorest countries in the world, and there's still amazing joy in these people's lives, in spite of the squalor and the lack and the want for food and the want for stability from their government. There's still amazing joy and love, and so there's great lessons all around it. So we just open our eyes to look for them.
Yeah, I think we're just in a lost space right now. Hopefully that we begin to come out of that lostness a little bit. I watched a movie recently, and I won't mention it here because it's politically divisive, but he was talking to tribes members in Africa and kind of trying to explain some of these social issues that were like, they didn't even, and you probably know which one I'm talking about, but they literally they couldn't understand the concept. Like, they didn't even have language for him to explain what he was talking about, because it was so off the rails from what life should be about. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now, where it's just, it's every day. Somebody said the other day, it's like, we're literally living in a South Park episode. It's gotten so crazy that you almost can't believe what you're seeing. And I'm 50, about to be 51. And so I come from that Gen X, right? Like somebody posted the other day talking about how we're the toughest generation. We drank out of hoses and we built stupid ramps for our BMX bikes with no helmets. We jumped off the roof. Like, don't mess with us because we will take you out. Right. So, and I think that again, back to your point, kind of to bring it full circle, it's those struggles that we're in a society now where the struggles are completely made up. Like, they're not even real. There's no real struggle for people. You're just making crap up because you don't have anything else to talk about at this point.
Was the funny thing in my travels. Those countries that really have struggle, like you mentioned, this African country where there really is struggle, this stuff isn't even on their radar.
No,
that's how good we have it here, is that we have made up struggles, right? Right? How upside down is that? But the good news is, I have kind of been on this news fast for a long time, and I used to be a political junkie and had to be the first person to know everything. But I've gotten to the point where I feel like if it's going to be that important, I'll know it'll get to me, right?
Yeah.
So really, I just look at culture nowadays, right? And they say that culture is upstream from politics anyway, right? And so I try to see what's going on in the world. And it does seem like the pendulum is starting to swing back. It does seem to me, I see a few clues here and there that people who used to be on this kind of bandwagon are saying, wait, we've gone way too far on some of these things. What happens when, all of our men are emasculated and all women are good and all men are bad? That's not an accurate commentary on our society. The facts don't show this to be true.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think that there's an awakening, not a wokeness, but an awakening to the truth.
Yeah.
Into reality. And as I said earlier, reality is our friend. If we can just focus on that instead of trying to believe these stupid, mantras and quotes that we're hearing from some of these woke people, I think we're going to be a lot better off. This reality is our friend.
Yeah, I think people are just getting kind of tired. And I think on whether you're center, liberal, conservative, I think everybody's just kind of tired of the BS. And it's, it's just, it's crazy. We live in a crazy time. So I'm hoping, I have hope that things will, it's like, Jesus, come quickly. Let's just put us all, let's just be done. But it's still, it's fun. I mean, we get to have these kind of conversations. The technology that we have now is so cool. I mean, it's really and we have the freedom to really do, if you want to go out and say stupid things in the town square, that's your right.
Yeah,
we have people that fight for that
yes,
fight
I
for
love
that
it.
rap, right? So
yeah, and we should. I mean, this is where I mentioned earlier, iron sharpens iron, the best of ideas, but you have to be able to talk about these ideas. You have to be able to disagree with each other. And this is where I get so wrapped around the axle on what's happened to our universities now. It used to be that's where all the discourse would happen. This is where the best ideas would come from, and now they're being shut down.
Well, there are ideas. They're just very specific ideas that they require that you subscribe to, right? Like if you don't know about the university system and what's going on right now with that, do some research on it, because you talk about crazy. It's very, very crazy out there. So, for sure.
Absolutely right. You're right. Good.
Well, I think that's as Mike Rose says, great place to land the plane. This has been a huge joy for me to be able to sit and talk about, pretty much everything. And I think it's helpful to me. It's poignant for me. I think it's like, I really needed this week. Honestly, it's, a lot of times these podcasts are for my own, and to use a big word, for my own edification, right? Like I'm glad all of you people came around to listen to, but I've just really had a good time. So
yeah, I did too. Thank you so much for inviting me on here.
And so they go to LarryBroughton.me, right? BROU. Is that the best place to get you?
Broughton.
Broughton. Okay.
Broughton, Larry Broughton. Yeah. So you can go to, by the way, I just now got the LarryBroughton.com after trying to get it for 25 years. So
wow.
You can go to LarryBroughton.com or thelarrybroughton.com or LarryBroughton.me, or just Google it. There aren't a lot of me out there. Just Google Larry Broughton, and all the social media platforms is just at Larry Broughton.
That's awesome.
BROUGHTON.
And I'll put that in the show notes for sure. Hey, man, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, buddy.
All right.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.